Welcome to Metro Talk. I'm Kent Scheffel. Thanks for being with us. Pat Gowan, one of the editors with the Post-Dispatch, is here. Welcome, Pat.
Hi, Kent.
And Jim Schrader, the publisher of the Telegraph's alongside. Welcome, Jim.
Hi, Kent.
Jim, Governor Quinn says he's okay with the idea of lame duck lawmakers taking care of pension reform in Illinois. Is there a problem with the lame duck lawmakers doing that?
Well, on the one hand, it certainly scares me because some of those lawmakers will certainly not be back next year. Some of them have chosen not to run. Some of them, due to redistricting, have combined. Some of them are just going to lose in the anti-incumbent sentiment that is kind of prevalent out there right now. On the other hand, I think, okay, this problem was not created with this legislature in place. But this legislature hasn't done anything with it either. We keep kicking the proverbial can down the road, and our biggest solution to come out of Springfield is, well, we'll shift some of the burden off the state government onto local governments, and that's how we're going to help fix this pension problem. So I guess on that hand, I think, well, if the lame duck Congress would deal with it and get some type of meaningful, and I caution to use the meaningful word, but some type of meaningful reform, figuring, oh, well, we're not going to be back, that at least something would get done other than continuing to forestall the inevitable. The last session, the idea about moving the teachers' pensions obligations to local school boards was floated. And that was going to kind of help relieve some of the burden from the state, but that just moves it out of the left pocket into the right pocket. We, the taxpayers, are still going to have to come with it, or come up with the funding. So I don't see that as a meaningful fix to the balance of the pension problem that the state has. So maybe the lame duck Congress could say, hey, what the heck, we're not going to be here anymore. We'll do something and we'll let the guys sort it out next year in January when they come aboard, but we're going to do something meaningful now on our way out.
Pat, Governor Quinn says he's okay with lame duck lawmakers handling pension reform. Is there a problem with that?
Well, it may be the only way to get things done, and that's a terrible thing to be saying about our government. To look back almost 2 years ago, Illinois was in terrible financial shape, worse probably relatively then than now. The solution to many seemed to be an income tax increase that they simply couldn't get passed until they came to a lame duck session, and they passed it pretty much with minimum 60-57 in the House and 30-29 in the Senate, not a vote spare in the Senate. No Republican voted for the income tax increase, lame duck or otherwise, but I think it got enough Democrats who might have had cold feet about the tax increase to vote for it on their way out. So if it takes a lame duck session to give a spine to people who think that they cannot vote their conscience if they've got to run for re-election again because it's going to hurt them get re-elected, there's something fundamentally wrong with government. We don't send these people to Springfield with the idea of having them vote the way that makes it more probable for them to be re-elected. We hope they'll do what they think is the right thing. And if it takes a lame duck session for them to change from the politically expedient to the right thing, that's sad commentary. It also leads somewhere that I've always been ambivalent about, and that's term limits. Illinois does not have term limits. Some other states have had them, have gotten rid of them, some have kept them. I think in the case of Illinois, it's almost an argument for term limits to say that if you can enforce more lame ducks, you might be able to get more done, because it sure doesn't look like anything much is getting done any other way in Springfield. And as Jim pointed out, these problems were caused by lame ducks. If you looked at how the financial problems of Illinois accumulated over the years, my guess is that more people responsible for it have left the legislature than are still there if you go back over 10, 20, 30 years of this. So lame ducks were probably responsible for it. And if you don't want a lame duck legislator to vote on important legislation and end the term with the election, because as long as he stays in office after the election, he has the same power he had before that. But I am dismayed at the idea it takes a lame duck to get something done.
The least common denominator in the last 27 years is 20 of those years Speaker of the House Mike Madigan has been in place. And that has been the bottleneck on a lot of these bills, just either dying in committee, never being called for a vote. I think this is exactly the sentiment that drives some states into term limits, that these guys will grow a spine if they know that they're out come January, and finally do what's right when they know that they are stumbling out the front door.
Well, if I might interject something too, because it leads to that. The most important term limits to people who propose term limits, they don't talk about this part of it much, but the most important term limit to them would be a guy like Mike Madigan, who I believe it's 26 of the last 28, I think, years he's been, or 28 of the last 30 years, he's been Speaker of the House. The people of Illinois don't elect him Speaker. The majority of Democrats in the House elect him Speaker. He gets into the House because his home district returns him time and time again. If he were term limited, his home district couldn't do it. It forces a turnover in leadership, which could be a terrible thing, could be a good thing. But when you think about term limits, you're thinking about your home legislator. A lot of the impact of term limits would have to do with forcing a turnover of leadership.
We need to take a break. We'll have more Metro Talk after this.
Hi, I'm Audrey Lucchese, and I'm from Alton, Illinois. I love music, and that's why I came to Lewis & Clark. It's been an amazing experience here at Lewis & Clark, working with students that are so talented, coming from all over the area, and they work so hard to follow their dreams. The music faculty at Lewis & Clark they're fantastic, and they're there every step of the way to push you to follow your dreams. One of the unique opportunities that I have had at Lewis & Clark is being able to record my own music with a fellow student here. Being able to record our music has opened doors for us in the music industry. My long-term goal is to finish here at Lewis & Clark and then to transfer to a four-year school and finish my degree in music performance. I would recommend Lewis & Clark to another student because it is definitely a great place to get started and it can open so many doors for you.
Big dreams and good grades aren't enough to get into college. There are actual steps you need to take. Finding someone who can help is the first and most important. For the next steps, go to knowhowtogo.org.
You're watching Metro Talk. I'm Ken Scheffel. Jim Schrader and Pat Gowan are alongside. Pat, William Cellini, who was known as the King of Clout in Springfield because of the weight he carried, even though he was not a lawmaker, has now been sentenced to a year in prison. That's related to trying to raise money for the Blagojevich campaign and shaking down an individual, or attempting to shake down an individual to get that campaign contribution. Was a year sentence the correct sentence?
For the last 40 of his about 77 years on Earth, Bill Cellini has been one of the most fascinatingly enigmatic characters of Illinois politics. He never held an elective office, except he was treasurer of the Sangamon County Republican Party. He's elected by the party, I guess. He was Governor Ogilvy's, effectively, Secretary of Transportation, and it got him a lot of contacts that stood him in good stead later. He was a Republican who did something that a lot of Democrats wish Republicans would do today. He knew how to cooperate across the aisle. This was a guy who was right there dealing with Democrats right and left when there was money to be made. For example, with Argosy, with the original Alton Bell. He was a major investor. He was a bigwig in a coalition of people who included Democrats and Republicans who could grease the skids, not squids, on both sides of the aisle to get things done. And the getting of things done was to make money. And that's what Cellini was very good at, making money using political access, using political clout, and of course, according to federal authorities, using political muscle to attempt to extract money for people who could do him good. Now, this is where it becomes like a movie. So what ends up happening to Bill Cellini after years and years of this sort of thing? He ends up convicted of a Republican now, big-time Republican, of trying to shake down campaign contributions for Rod Blagojevich, notorious Democrat. And who is he trying to shake down? Thomas Rosenberg, Hollywood producer, who maybe his best known movie is $1 Million Baby. I mean, as they say, you can't make this stuff up. Now he's been sentenced to a year and a day in prison, which in the federal system is less than a year, because if it's a year, you got to serve the year. If it's anything over a year, even by a day, you get 85%. Slaney at 77 and undisputedly in bad health is going to serve a year, or 10 months rather, which could be the rest of his life or not. And I think of all the people, the real political players of Illinois over decades and decades and decades, speaking for my own self, but as somebody who's watched it for all these years, I think he was the guy we never thought they'd get. And he was the last in the string of the Blagojevich convictions, essentially.
Never thought they'd get because
this guy was connected up in every possible way, because he was nimble, he not only knew how to make money, he knew how to stay out of the limelight, he was shrewd, he was smart, and to get himself involved in this, which essentially was trying to extort Rosenberg's investment arm for campaign contributions in exchange for business from the teachers' retirement system, where Salini had a crooked pal, Blagojevich too. That's what ended up dealing. It was a simple thing that one would have thought Salini would have steered around. And after years of making deals, and I'm not saying they were illegal or illegal deals in the past, but after years of making deals, at the time he does this, he's still in his mid-70s, early to mid-70s. How much money does he need to get tripped up in a crime like this? It is a surprise to me.
Jim, surprised at a 1-year sentence for William Salini. Do you agree with the term?
Well, I think the key to the question was known as the king of clout in Springfield and in Chicago. This is the guy that knew all of the players and knew how to play along with all of the players, as Pat points out. He played on both sides of the aisle. If there was a buck to be made somewhere along the road, the fact that he has to serve some prison time shows some strength in the judicial system, because here is a guy that put together deals for, as Pat said, 40 years. And somewhere along the lines, some of those were questionable, and this guy avoided the limelight and got things done. And if we really could find out the effect that some of his backdoor deals really have had on this state, I think we would all be amazed. The fact that he does have to serve some prison time shows the strength of the judicial system in the federal case. It shows to the state of Illinois and to the constituents in the state of Illinois and would-be William Salini's coming forward, careful what you do, because the smallest thing may trip you up. This is kind of like Al Capone going down for income tax evasion because they couldn't pin anything else on him. What would be the slightest of the crimes is what really finally was his undoing. I think in this particular case, the fall from grace with William Salini serving, unfortunately, what may be the rest of his life in prison is a huge drop in prestige. I agree that he has to serve time, and as Pat points out, this will be the last of the Blagojevich era, and we can kind of put that to rest pending the appeals of Blagojevich, who continues to profess his innocence in all of this.
I think from a realistic point of view, if he didn't get prison, they didn't get him. At 77, a conviction without prison isn't going to mean much to his life.
Now, I need to go back to some comments during the first segment of the show where you talked about term limits, and maybe that's a solution for Illinois. This is a man who was extremely powerful, probably more powerful than some lawmakers, but never, as you said, held an elected office other than a county office.
No, and I think what Salini was involved in is probably a strong argument against term limits, because he was able to stand up against even people who had accumulated a lot of power and a lot of knowledge by being there year after year, term after term. If you had term limits and he was dealing with newbies year after year and term after term, I think that would simply magnify the power of a guy like him, who is behind the scenes, who knew how to get you campaign money to get you reelected. He needed a favor. It didn't have to be a big favor. It didn't have to be an illegal favor, but the guy was always there making deals. And to some extent, I think the naivete of a newcomer would be more at risk for that.
Jim, Pat mentioned it earlier, some people in this region probably don't know who Bill Cellini is, may have never heard of him, but he did have a big impact on our region from the standpoint that he's one of the people who got the Alton Bell here.
Well, and as Pat pointed out, so many of us have forgotten, the late 80s and early 90s. The boat finally opened for business in 91. It was a powerful group of business people, that one of which happened to be Cellini, but it was Democrats, it was Republicans, and this guy knew how to push the right buttons in Springfield and grease the squids, as it were, to get this done, to get the Bell, to get the first license for the city of Alton, and to get what was then the first riverboat casino licensed in the state of Illinois. They later sold out to private interests, and those powerful group of business people, including Bill Cellini, made a whole lot of money.
People here will remember the Sweethearts financing deal for the big hotel in Collinsville that stank to high heaven. Democrats and Republicans got together with it.
The now convention center.
Right. And with that deal, well, there was a second one in Springfield concurrent to that. Cellini wasn't in the one down here, but he was in the one in Springfield. Where there was big money around, Cellini's name would pop up.
We'll have more Metro Talk right after this.
Hello and welcome to the Lewis and Clark Minute. Today we're going to check out the radio broadcasting program in WLCA with Mike Lemons.
Have you ever listened to your favorite radio station or your favorite disc jockey and say, I could do that? Or maybe you're the type of person who says, I could never do something like that. Well, with the help of first-year Mass Comm student John, we're going to show you just how easy it is. Each voice intro starts with talking about the band that just played, and we add a station identifier. Next, you want to offer some information that may be of interest to your audience. And finally, tell the listeners what the next song is, who sings it, followed by another station identifier. John will do one live now.
Silver Sun Pickup substitution on WLCA. The Big Pink released their debut album called A Brief History of Love. The single is off that album. It's The Big Pink with Dominoes. It's on College Radio's Best 89.9.
This has been your Lewis and Clark Minute.
What's that? I don't know. Something I kind of made. Ooh, what's it do?
What do I do? Well, thanks for asking. I ring my bell and I like to dance. What do I do? Well, thanks for asking.
Ow! Yeah, it still needs a little work.
Anything's possible. Keep thinking. Get started on your own inventions or just play some games at inventnow.org.
Sounds like you could use some Van Gogurt. It's fortified with arts-rich nutrients to improve your math and reading skills. Catch!
Van Gogurt, thanks. So what's the deal with your ear?
Always with the ear, huh?
Feed your kids the arts. For 10 simple ways to learn how, visit AmericansForTheArts.org.
You're watching Metro Talk. I'm Kent Scheffel. Jim Schrader and Pat Gowan are alongside. Jim, Charter Communications is moving its headquarters out of St. Louis. They're going east. Is that a problem for the region that we're losing Charter as a headquarters company here?
It's kind of a black eye that the city of St. Louis is losing another Fortune 500 company, which certainly hurts. But we have to realize why they're moving. The business is being purchased basically with incentives coming from Stamford, Connecticut, which have now been delayed by about a month. But this is a multi-million-dollar deal. And unfortunately, that's what's happening in today's economy. A manufacturer says we're going to put up a auto plant somewhere. The state with the most incentives wins. You have what are basically office jobs, in the case of Charter, because they're still going to have people on the ground here. They're still going to have maintenance operators and office people here. But you start flashing around enough cash, you can get businesses to pack up and leave. Sometimes it happens to be moving the offices to where the principal directors are more comfortable, or they're closer, or they feel the taxes are more advantageous. But in this particular case, this is a bunch of money being lavished on charter and saying, you come out here and we'll give you the stars and the moon and throw in the sun just to get you to pack up and leave. You leave a skeleton crew in St. Louis that you have to operate your business, but come over here. It's the same way with some of the auto plants that have been built around this country. We have cases where states right across the border are competing. Where are you going to put a business in St. Charles? Are you going to put a business in Alton? We have states competing with one another, and we, the taxpayers, are the ones that ultimately have to foot the bill with this game of chicken. Charter took the incentives and said, okay, we're going to pack up and leave.
Pat, is it a problem for the St. Louis region that Charter Communications is moving its headquarters out east?
You know, incentive money is part of it, but they hired the head of Cablevision who lived in New York, and I'm sure when the deal was made, he said, I'm not moving to St. Louis. They're talking about moving under 100 of the 600 headquarter jobs, and they're talking about adding 300 jobs to some other new project that they've got anyway. So a year after this happens, Charter may have more employees in St. Louis than it had when it was still the world headquarters. This has happened a lot of times before, and one of the times it happened was to St. Louis's benefit. Going back a couple of decades, I believe it was McDonnell Douglas that had an executive named David Lewis in General Dynamics, a huge defense contractor that built nothing at all in the St. Louis area, wanted David Lewis to be its CEO. And Lewis didn't want to leave St. Louis. And they brought the mountain to him. I think that was like 600 jobs for General Dynamics. They came to St. Louis. St. Louis was the world headquarters for one of the biggest defense contractors, which still built nothing here. But Lewis didn't have to leave his home. And eventually, Lewis retired, and guess what happened to General Dynamics? They went on somewhere else, which means, who knows, if the successor for the CEO of Charter ends up being from Palo Alto, the whole darn thing might move to California. It's pretty easy to move the very top echelon people because there aren't that many people to move, because a lot of them may already be at the destination location like this guy and some of his top lieutenants are, and as Jim points out, because there's money on hand to pay for the facilities you need to do it. So St. Louis is still the headquarters for 8 Fortune 500 companies, which isn't a lot, not near as many as it once was. One factor in that also is going to be a loss of the air hub. There's a lot of transportation involved, and it's not as easy to get around the country from St. Louis as it was when we were TWA's hub. So I wouldn't be surprised if 5 or 10 years from now that number's less than 8.
Jim, Illinois is selling a prison. The correctional center at Thompson is being sold to the federal government. Is that a good move for the state to be making? Is it a problem for the state to be selling one of its prisons to the feds?
Well, we're taping this on Tuesday as we editorialized on Monday. It depends on your perspective. It's good news and it's bad news. It's good news that the state of Illinois is out from under this white elephant that they built and couldn't afford to fund. I think out of the prison was built to house 1,600 inmates. The top that was ever there, where it's housed, was about 200. The state flat didn't have the money to operate this, so this takes this new, what 5 years ago was state of the art, I suspect it still is, takes that obligation off the state and puts it on the feds. For those of you who think that you're getting a bargain, that means you're still going to pay for it. It's just you're going to pay for it out of your federal taxes instead of out of your state taxes. So the good news is that obligation is off the state. The bad news is we still have a prison overpopulation problem in the state of Illinois. We're about 50% overpopulated. The state still can't fund its penal institutions. We still have a governor that wants to close the correctional center at Dwight and the prison at Tams, which is going to further reduce the number of rooms that we have for inmates, even though a prison system that is supposed to house about 33,000 inmates is somewhere in the neighborhood of 48,000 current prison population. So the good news is the state's out from under Thompson. They don't have to figure out how to operate a $165 million prison. The bad news is we still have at least 16,000 too many prisoners in the state of Illinois that we're either going to figure out how to feed and clothe and house, or we're going to turn them loose, or pay another state to house them and pay the funding. So it's good news and it's bad news. Short term, it's good news that it gets the white elephant out of the list of properties for the state of Illinois.
Pat, good news or bad news that the state is selling its correctional center in Thompson to the federal government?
If I was Governor Quinn, I'd have put in a fine print, hoping they didn't see it, that it came fully populated and that you actually bought a prison full of inmates already, and that would, gee, tough luck. Jim's point's well taken. Illinois is overcrowded. It's kind of a shame to see this beautiful new prison, beautiful by prison standards, go unused by the state, but there's just not really any prospect that the state can afford to staff that too. $165 million price to the feds. They figure about 1,100 jobs in an area that used to be called Forgotonia, might still be called that. Not many people up in the northeastern corner of Illinois. Northwestern corner, a lot of people in the northeastern corner, nobody in the northwestern corner. And about $200 million economic impact, they say. Interestingly, the feds would have bought this a long time ago, but it came down to one member of the House on a key committee. His name's Frank Wolf. He's a Republican from Virginia, and he could not get beyond the idea that we were going to take terrorists from Guantanamo Bay and put them in Thompson, Illinois. And even after a law was passed that said you cannot do that, he continued to argue that there was a risk of that, and he was afraid there was some loophole that the Obama administration would be to populate the place with international terrorists. Never mind that there are a large number of international terrorists already held in U.S. prisons. By the way, they went around him. Finally, they found out that as a matter of courtesy, they had to listen to him, but not as a matter of law, and they got tired of listening, got tired of kowtowing, and they just went around him. Some of the opponents of the prison at Thompson being federalized and the possibility of terrorism suspects being held there, one of the specific examples was a concern that this would make Illinois a special target for terrorists who will want to bomb the Willis Tower, which used to be the Sears Tower, tallest building in the U.S., short of the new thing in New York. And I thought that was really amusing in a way, because 5 people have already been charged with that. We're going to trial and will be held in prison in the U.S. if and when they're convicted. So it still doesn't make any sense.
That's going to do it for this round of Metro Talk. Thanks for being with us. Jim Schrader, the publisher of the Telegraph, has been here, along with Pat Gowan, one of the editors of the Post-Dispatch. I'm Kent Scheffel. We'll see you next time.